He had been counting the same coins for 11 minutes when the pharmacist told him to move. Not to wait, not to step aside. To move. The word landed the way only that word can land, when a man is 71 years old, and his hands are trembling, and the fluorescent light above counter 4 at MedPlus Pharmacy on Odutola Street in Ibadan is too white and too loud, and he has been standing in it since 6:42 in the morning. The coins were on the counter. 420 naira. He needed 550 naira for the blood pressure medication. He was 130 naira short, and he had been rearranging the coins as though a different arrangement might change the total. The pharmacist's name tag read Blessing. She was 26 years old with acrylic nails the color of flamingo feathers and a phone she kept checking below the counter. She looked at the coins the way you look at a mess someone else made. She did not look at the man. There were 4 other people in the queue. One of them, a young man in a yellow polo shirt, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was closer to an exhale shaped like amusement. The woman behind him smiled at her phone. The security guard at the door folded his arms and looked at the ceiling. The old man's name was Tobena Akebe. He was standing in that pharmacy because his wife had a 7:30 a.m. cardiology appointment at the University College Hospital 9 minutes away, and the medication she needed had run out 2 days ago, and he had walked the 4 kilometers from their house on Okiado Road because the fuel in his motorcycle had been gone since Thursday, and the 150 naira in his right trouser pocket had a hole in it that he had been meaning to sew since February. He wore a brown agbada he had owned for 19 years. It was clean. His wife pressed it for him every Sunday evening, whether he was going anywhere or not, because she said a man should always have one thing that was ready. The collar sat straight. The embroidery at the chest was faded in 2 places, but the stitching had not come loose. He did not own a car. He had sold it in 2019 to pay the hospital bill when his wife first collapsed in the kitchen. He had not mentioned this to anyone. He had also not mentioned that he had been skipping his own blood pressure medication for 3 weeks so that the money lasted long enough for hers. "Sir, I'm asking you to please step aside." Blessing said it with the tone of someone repeating a sentence they were tired of repeating, though this was only the 2nd time she had said it. "You are holding up the queue." Tobena looked at the coins. He picked them up one by one and returned them to his breast pocket. His hands were not shaking because he was afraid. They shook because they always shook now. A thing that had started 2 years ago and that the doctor said was a circulation issue, and that he managed by holding things very slowly. "Thank you for your patience," he said. He said it to Blessing. He said it to the 4 people in the queue. He said it to the security guard who was still looking at the ceiling. Then he turned toward the door. He was 3 steps from it when his phone rang. He kept his phone in a small leather case that his daughter Chidinma had given him in 2014 before she moved to London. The case was navy blue and had a small silver clasp that he pressed twice before the cover opened because his thumb joints did not cooperate with small things on the first try. He pressed it twice now. The screen lit up. The number was a Lagos number. A 0803 prefix. He did not recognize it, but he answered. Because at 71 years old, you answer every call the first time, because you have learned that the calls you do not answer are sometimes the ones that matter. He did not know that the person on the other end of that call had been trying to reach him for 6 days. He did not know that the reason they had found his number at all was a letter he had written and mailed by hand in January. A letter he had told no one about, including his wife, because he did not want her to feel like a burden, and he did not want her to tell him to stop. He did not know any of that yet. He pressed the phone to his ear and walked through the pharmacy door and into the pale morning light of Odutola Street and said the only thing he ever said when he answered a call whose number he did not know. "Good morning. Who is this?" Tobena Achebe was born in 1953 in a village called Ozubulu in Anambra State, the second of 7 children and the first boy. His father was a mathematics teacher who believed that numbers were a kind of prayer, that if you kept your accounts clean, you were telling the world you respected it. He grew up counting things: paces between the schoolhouse and the road, stars in the section of sky visible from his bedroom window, stitches in the hem of his school uniform when the edges frayed. He was 58 kilograms now, a figure he knew precisely because he weighed himself every Sunday morning at the clinic on Okiata Road where the scale was free. He had been 74 kilograms in 2017. The difference was years of managing 2 people's health on a pension of 18,500 naira per month, a pension he had been receiving since his retirement from the Oyo State Ministry of Education in 2018 after 31 years of service as a secondary school mathematics teacher. He wore wire-rimmed glasses that had been mended with electrical tape at the left hinge since a grandchild sat on them in 2022. He had not replaced them because they still worked, and because the money for new frames had 3 times been redirected to something more urgent. He smelled faintly of the raw balm he applied to his knees each morning, and something underneath it. Something clean and old, like ironed cotton and harmattan dust. He carried one object that mattered. It was a small brown notebook, 96 pages, the kind sold at every stationery stall in every Nigerian market for 150 naira. But this one was different in the way objects become different when they have been handled 1,000 times. The cover was soft with use. The pages near the back were slightly wavy from a morning in 2021 when it was caught in a downpour outside Ring Road roundabout. He had spread the pages in the sun and let it dry page by page, carefully, because it could not be replaced. In that notebook, he had written down everything. Every medication his wife Ngozi had been prescribed since her diagnosis. Every dosage, every date refilled, every price, every side effect she mentioned and what time she mentioned it, every appointment, every test result, the name of every doctor who had seen her, and what they had said, and what Tobena had observed that the doctor had not asked about. The notebook began in October 2019 and was currently on its 3rd refill pad, held together with a rubber band. Ngozi did not know the notebook existed. Tobena was not sure why he had kept it from her, except that, when he looked at it, he saw something a husband should carry, not something a wife should have to witness. He had also written something else in the notebook. In January, after a particularly difficult night when Ngozi's blood pressure had spiked to 187/112 and the nearest functioning hospital had been 23 minutes away, and the fuel had been gone, and he had borrowed his neighbor Emeka's motorcycle and ridden in the dark and arrived and waited and sat in a plastic chair at 3:14 a.m. while the fluorescent light in the waiting room buzzed above him and a nurse told him they would attend to her shortly. After that night, he had gone home and written a letter. It was addressed to the director of the Covenant Heart Foundation, a charity organization he had read about in a newspaper from 2023 that his neighbor used to wrap tomatoes and that he had flattened and read carefully, cover to cover, the way he read everything. The foundation provided cardiac care funding for elderly patients in Oyo and Lagos states. He had read the article 4 times. He had copied the foundation's address from the masthead onto a piece of paper he kept in his Agbada pocket for 17 days before he found a 200 naira envelope and wrote the letter in his careful, small handwriting. He explained Ngozi's condition. He listed every medication. He listed the pension figure. He did not ask for charity. He asked to be considered for the Foundation's quarterly medical subsidy program, and he attached a handwritten record of all expenses from the previous 14 months. He had not mentioned the letter to anyone. He did not know who was calling. The walk from his house on Okiado Road to the pharmacy had taken 23 minutes at his pace. It was the kind of October morning in Ibadan that could not decide what it wanted. The Harmattan had not properly arrived yet, but the heat of September had begun to retreat, and what was left was a dry, grayed air that smelled of dust and burnt rubber from the early commercial buses on the ring road. Tobena had walked with a nylon bag folded in his breast pocket beside the notebook, because he had intended to come out with something in it. He had left the house at 6:19 a.m. without waking Ngozi, because she slept poorly, and the appointment was not until 7:30, and she needed the extra 40 minutes more than she needed to see him leave. He had put her medications, the ones that remained, on the kitchen table with a glass of water and a folded note on a torn corner of brown paper bag that said, "Drink before you dress. I will be back before 7. He had written this in the same small handwriting he used for the notebook. Then, he had pulled his agbada straight at the collar, the way Ngozi pressed it for him every Sunday, and he had gone out. He tried 3 places before MedPlus. The first was a small pharmacy on Molite Road, a place he had used twice before, where the attendant told him they had been out of Losartan 50 Mine G for 11 days and did not know when the next supply would arrive. She said this with genuine apology. The second place, a larger store near Challenge Roundabout, had the Losartan but not the amlodipine. The attendant there, a young man who smelled of peppermint gum and had clearly just arrived for his shift, offered to sell Tobena half a blister of amlodipine 10 Manian G and suggested cutting the tablets. Tobena said he would not cut the tablets without a doctor's instruction. The attendant shrugged. By the time he reached MedPlus on Odutola Street, it was 6:38 a.m. His feet hurt. He had no diagnosis for why his feet hurt in the mornings, but they had hurt every morning for 4 months when he walked more than a kilometry, a fact he had noted in the notebook under his own name on a page at the back that he had started, and told himself was not urgent. The pavement on the last block of Odutola was broken in 3 places, and he stepped carefully around each one. Because a fall at 71 with no one watching was a different category of problem than it had been at 51. He had 420 naira. The medication cost 550. He had known since the previous evening that he was 130 naira short, and he had spent some part of the night running the arithmetic in the dark, a habit his wife used to tease him for, lying beside her adding figures nobody had asked him to add. There was no solution in the arithmetic. 420 was 420. He would go anyway and ask whether they could provide the medication on credit against next month's pension disbursement, which was due in 16 days. He had not anticipated the coins being met with amusement. He had anticipated a refusal. He had not anticipated the quality of the dismissal, the way a man's entire life can be assessed in the time it takes a pharmacist to glance down at a counter. The small kindness came from outside the pharmacy entirely. It came from a tea seller named Mama Kemi, who operated a folding table on the corner of Odutola Street, 20 meters from the pharmacy door. She had watched him come out, the slow turn, the careful folding of his hand back into his pocket, and when he paused on the pavement, she called across to him. She was a wide woman in a yellow and green wrapper, with a cooking pot wrapped in cloth to keep the warmth in. "Baba," she said, "come and sit small." He did not sit, but he crossed to her table and she pressed a small enamel cup into his hands without a word about payment. The tea was ginger and something else, cloves, he thought, and something dried and sweet he could not name. He held the cup with both hands because the warmth helped his joints. He stood there, while the street around him gathered itself into mourning. A Danfo bus shuddered past with its sliding door half open. A man with a wheelbarrow of tubers pushed it over the broken pavement where Tobena had stepped carefully. Two schoolchildren in brown uniforms ran toward something in the distance. A bus, a friend. The start of something. Mama Kemi said nothing. She refilled his cup once without asking. He finished it and set the cup down. "Thank you," he said. "Go well, Baba," she said. He went back toward the pharmacy door. He was 3 steps from it when his phone rang. The MedPlus pharmacy queue had resumed its normal pace approximately 40 seconds after Tobena walked out the door. Blessing had already processed the yellow polo shirt's prescription, antibiotics, 1,200 naira, paid by card without discussion. The woman with the phone had collected her prenatal vitamins. The security guard had unfolded his arms. Nobody in that pharmacy had noticed what was happening outside on Odutola Street, where an old man in a brown Igbada with a mended notebook in his breast pocket had stopped walking and was standing very still on the concrete, while a voice on the phone said something that made him reach for the wall of the pharmacy building with one hand, not because he was falling, but because he needed to make contact with something solid. His neighbor Emeka's wife saw him from the bus window. She was on the 7:05 a.m. BERT heading downtown. She saw his hand on the wall and his head bowed over the phone. She pressed her face to the glass. She could not hear anything. She watched until the bus carried her past. She sent a message to Emeka that said, "I think I just saw Baba Achebe on Odutola. He looked like something happened. Can you check?" Emeka read the message at 7:23 a.m. By then, everything had already changed. The voice on the phone belonged to a woman named Dr. Adaize Owusu Boateng. She was 49 years old, the director of programs at the Covenant Heart Foundation. And she had been trying to reach Tobena Achebe since the previous Monday. The number in the letter was slightly unclear, a 4 that looked like a 9, and it had taken 6 days and 3 referrals through the Oyo State Pension Board's records department before she had the right number in front of her. She had read his letter twice when it arrived, and then called her assistant into the office to read it also. Not because she needed a second opinion, but because she wanted someone else in the room when she said what she said next, which was, "This man keeps a better clinical record than most of the hospitals we partner with." The letter had arrived at the Foundation's office on Awolowo Road in Lagos Island on the 19th of January. It sat in the intake stack for 11 days before it came to Adaize's desk. She read it on the morning of the 30th, with a cup of ginger tea that went cold while she was reading, and she had not noticed. The record Tobena had attached: 14 months of medication costs, appointment dates, diagnosis progression, and observed symptoms, was 6 pages long, and written in a hand so precise that the columns aligned without the aid of ruled lines. Adaize, who had a PhD in public health from the University of Lagos and had reviewed perhaps 9,000 patient files in her career, sat for a moment after she finished and did not move. She flagged the letter for immediate review. The Foundation's quarterly subsidy program had a waiting list of 214 applicants. She submitted Tobena's application as a Category A case, advanced cardiac diagnosis in an at-risk demographic, no secondary income source, documented primary caregiver with no caregiver support. The approval had come through 11 days ago. She had been trying to reach him since Monday. If this story is already sitting somewhere in your chest, subscribe before you read what she told him. Because what comes next is the part this family had been waiting for, without knowing they were waiting. She told him that his application had been approved. She told him that the Foundation would be covering Ngozi's cardiac medications in full for the next 12 months. through their pharmacy partner network, which included 17 locations in Ibadan, including the MedPlus on Odutola Street. She told him that a monthly allowance of 12,000 naira for transportation to medical appointments had been approved because the letter had specified the absence of functioning transport. She told him that a foundation nurse would be contacting him within 48 hours to conduct a home assessment and help register Ngozi in their monitored care program. She said all of this clearly and not quickly. She paused after each piece of information to allow him to absorb it. Tobena did not say anything for a moment after she finished. Then he said, "I need to write this down." He reached into his breast pocket and took out the brown notebook. He pressed the phone between his ear and his shoulder, a thing that was uncomfortable because of his neck, but that he did. And he opened the notebook to the next clean page. He wrote the date. He wrote Adeze's name. He wrote each item as she repeated it, slowly. His handwriting, even now, was small and precise. When he had written everything, he said, "I have one question." She said, "Of course." He said, "The 130 naira I was short this morning. Will the pharmacy partner system cover what I need for her today? Because she has an appointment at 7:30. There was a half-second pause. Then Adeze said, "Go back inside. Give them this reference number." She read him a 10-digit code. He wrote it down. Then he thanked her, not effusively, not at length, but with the particular quietness of a man who has been carrying something very heavy and has just been told he can set it down. He closed the notebook. He put the phone back in the leather case. He pressed the silver clasp twice. Then he turned around and walked back into MedPlus Pharmacy on Odutola Street. Blessing looked up when the door opened. She recognized him immediately in the way you recognize someone you have just dismissed, with a specific quality of impatience that braces itself for a continuation of the same inconvenience. She was already opening her mouth when he reached the counter. He placed a piece of paper on the counter, a page torn from the back of the notebook, the reference number written on it in his small, clean hand. "Covenant Heart Foundation Pharmacy Subsidy," he said. Reference number. "My wife's name is Ngozi Akebe. The medication is amlodipine 5 mg and losartan 50 mg. I believe there is also a 12-month registration process I need to complete." Blessing looked at the paper. She looked at the number. She looked at Tobena. She typed the reference number into the terminal. The screen returned a result she had seen only twice before, a green header with the Foundation's logo and the words Category A approved. No patient contribution required. She reached for the paper with both hands, her flamingo-colored nails pressed flat against the counter. The young man in the yellow polo shirt was still at the end of the queue, waiting for a second prescription. He saw none of this. He was looking at his phone. The security guard saw it. He watched Tobena's back. He watched Blessing's face change. He unfolded his arms and put them at his sides. Tobena collected the medication, both boxes, and placed them in the small nylon bag he had brought from home. He folded the bag carefully at the top. He nodded at Blessing, who had not yet found what she wanted to say. He walked to the door. He was on the street, 4 steps outside, when he stopped and turned back one last time. Not to the pharmacist. He looked at the security guard, who was still watching him. "Thank you for your patience," Tobena said. It was the same thing he had said 40 minutes ago on his way out the first time. He said it the same way. He meant it. Then he walked toward University College Hospital, 9 minutes away at his pace, to meet his wife for her 7:30 appointment. 3 weeks later, a woman named Dr. Adeze Owusu Boateng sent a routine follow-up email to her team regarding the Ibadan cases in the new quarterly cohort. She noted that Ngozi Akebe's blood pressure had dropped to 128/84 at the first monitored visit, her best reading in 6 years. She noted that the caregiver, one Tobena Akebe, had submitted a voluntary supplemental care log for the first home assessment visit that was, in her words, the most thorough patient record I have received from a family member in 22 years of practice. She recommended that the foundation create a caregiver documentation template based on the format Tobena had developed independently. The template was eventually adopted across all 17 Ibadan partner sites. They named it the Family Record Form. Nobody outside the foundation knew whose handwriting it was based on. The brown notebook, third refill pad, was still being updated every Sunday morning. Tobena Akebe came to that pharmacy door at 6:42 in the morning with 420 naira and a notebook that nobody had asked to see. He had been carrying it for 5 years, without acknowledgement, without ceremony, without knowing it would ever matter to anyone but the woman sleeping in the room at the end of the hallway. He had kept the record the way his father had kept his accounts, because numbers were a kind of prayer, and because if you kept them clean, you were telling the world that you respected it. The world, eventually, listened. What they took from him at that counter was one small public moment. A man's coins on a pharmacy counter. A queue's impatient exhale. A door that swung shut. That was the most they ever had. Because what he carried in that breast pocket, the 5 years of handwritten dates, the margins full of observations, the soft worn cover, the pages dried page by page in the sun, that was something Blessing had no counter for. That was something no queue could hold. You can make a person step aside. You can count their coins and find them short. You can let a door close and turn back to your terminal and think the story ended there. But some people are not carrying what you can see. Some people are walking into rooms with the most quietly powerful thing in the world. Not money, not connections, not the name you recognize, but a record, a truth, a proof that they have been paying attention when nobody was watching them. The ones who dismiss you at the door are often not wrong about what they can see. They are wrong about what they cannot, and the difference between those two things is everything. If someone in your life is carrying something the world keeps overlooking, leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. And if you're still thinking about the morning Tobena walked out that door for the first time, subscribe. This channel is for stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.